I'm so proud I had that Gucci bag.
Speak for yourself, okay? It was a good idea to feed to the main brain, and the main brain agreed, and then we did the thing. Panpsychism would argue, we'll go and get one today, but we just don't have tools for it.
2,000 years later.
Well, we have this machine that measures consciousness, and you measure 300.
Ooh, that's kind of small. Yikes.
For a few minutes there, I thought we had a chance. Okay.
Pull the plug.
Hashtag unlucky. Imagine if we have, if we could telepathically communicate instead.
We've been trying to reach you concerning your vehicle's extended warranty.
Welcome to the 6th episode of the Kimudo podcast. My name is Kim, and this is Udo.
Hello.
Why do we fund science to find out more about what is consciousness? Why is consciousness important?
So the consciousness debate is pretty important right now, and if you look at various podcasts, like for example the Joe Rogan podcast, he's talking about consciousness quite often. That's a topic that comes up quite often on his podcast. But maybe that's just Joe Rogan being a crackhead, high on DMT again. But on other podcasts, for example, like Lex Fridman podcast. And Lex Fridman is a science guy, a computer scientist, AI engineer, and so someone who's more technical than Joe Rogan. You see that this is a topic that comes up there quite often as well. And the reason for it is because we are living in the AI era right now. So at some point when AI suppresses human intelligence, we also have to ask ourselves, about AGI, artificial general intelligence. Is that thing conscious? This super intelligent thing that we have created, is it conscious or is it not? Because there are several questions that we have to ask ourselves, like for example the Turing tests. How do we determine if something is conscious, if this AI system is conscious, and what implications does that have? And when at some point in the future we have a test for consciousness and the AI passes that test, then what do we do with that? And then I'm also asking myself a question, what if I take this consciousness test and then I fail the test? What does that mean for me? Like, am I not a conscious human being, or am I just a meatball, or what am I then?
I mean, I would say if you failed, then the definition is wrong or the test is wrong, because you are sentient, you are conscious. And to answer your question, if an AI were to pass, a quote unquote a Turing test for consciousness or being sentient, we would then immediately, if it passes the test, we would have to give it rights, right?
Right.
Rights and obligations. That's what it would gain.
Yeah, and these rights and obligations, they will probably be completely different from human rights. Because humans, like, if a human does something wrong, there will be a penalty. Like, you get thrown into jail, you have to pay some fee or so. But you can't do that with AI. Like, there's no AI jail. It doesn't make sense in that case.
Right.
So how do we discourage AI from doing bad things? All these are questions that are important that we have to think about right now, because if we think about them later, then might be too okay. I don't want to sound apocalyptic or so, but I think it's a generally a good approach to when you see a problem, that you think about it first, and then you will have some answers maybe even a good answer to deal with it before something bad happens.
Yeah, I think about it like I was listening to actually Joe Rogan as well, and he had that Pulitzer Prize winning journalist who writes a lot. I forget her name. Abroad, a lot about Secretary of Defense and military kind of defense and things like that. She just wrote something on like the nuclear arms race and the mutually assured destruction, and she was arguing that the problem with everything we've done ever so far is that when we make those mistakes, we can then correct. We make the political swing backwards, or we adjust or whatever. But there is no coming back from nuclear war. And not to be exactly like you're saying, doomsday apocalyptic kind of sayer. I also wonder though if AI, if there is something that could go incredibly wrong, it would be the same, wouldn't it? We would have to classify it as the same as a nuclear kind of because it could be the thing we don't actually get to adjust or learn from. Maybe. I mean, or probably not. To be honest with you, I don't know if I necessarily exactly believe that. But we have to at least consider the idea that this is extremely powerful. We're putting trillions and trillions and trillions of dollars into this tool that we don't really understand. And let's be honest, if something were to go wrong, if you have a very powerful tool with a lot of money and capital put into it, it's going to be effective whether it's for good or for bad. We just want to make sure that we think about these things, because if in case it goes, just everything goes really horribly wrong, and it decides that it needs to protect itself from us humans or whatever, if something like that were to happen. And again, I don't even think that's possible. I don't even think that's necessarily what it would do. It would need to be programmed and find that to be a good strategy, which I don't think it is a good strategy objectively. So I don't think that would happen. I just want to be clear. I'm positive. But it doesn't mean that we should not really, really consider taking these precautionary steps that you're talking about now and thinking about them, because it might be, maybe, that opportunity to do that is only now. It is not later once we've made that first mistake. Maybe.
One thing we should be talking about is for nuclear bombs, for example, there's the danger of radioactivity that takes thousands of years to go away. What's the danger of AI? I think one of the biggest dangers is like deep fakes and easy misinformation. And this gives control to people in power.
People with capital who can influence. Yeah. So why do we fund science? To find out more about consciousness. Why is consciousness so important then? Why are we discussing this in the first place?
I think the last 5 or 6 decades or so, maybe even longer, the focus has basically been more on science, like concrete things, and the spiritual part is diminishing. So, for example, the rate of religious people, the rate of Christians in Europe and in the US has been decreasing for a long time. And I wonder if that's bad.
And what do you think so far?
I mean, if we look back further into history, every civilization had something they believed in. Some higher being, like a god, or like the ancient Greek or ancient Romans had Neptune, Poseidon, and
Pantheons.
so on. Yeah.
Yep. Yeah.
Every civilization had something they believe in, something that is above them, and I think that's what gave people direction. Something higher to aim for, and that's a good motivation for them to achieve more and surpass themselves, surpass the last generation. And in the modern days, today's people, a lot of people don't have that. And what can easily happen then is that people fall back to materialistic things, like a nice car, a big house, and stuff like that. And that's not a high goal to aim for. Like, in the sense of it's not worth much. At the end of the day, at the end of your life, you're not going to be like, I'm so proud I had that Gucci bag.
Speak for yourself, okay? I'll go and get one today. But I understand. Yeah, we lose something, don't we? We lose in. I think you tell me if I'm misunderstanding you. But what I think you're saying is, in the modern world, we are more atheistic than we've ever been, and we lost some of those religious higher kind of goals to set, and we've chased instead. We found different things to be motivated by, or to chase, or to aim for, to try to make a good life, quote unquote. And you're saying at the end of when you're laying on your deathbed. Looking back on the material things is a much lesser goal, a less fulfilling goal than, for example, prior to that we might have had a religion that we then felt like we were heading towards a heaven, for example, or something else that, these things are supposed to be much higher.
Higher in value.
Yeah, higher in value, exactly.
And I think these things, they make you more conscious or more aware. When I think about consciousness, I think about especially making a conscious decision. So, for example, religious people would be like, don't hurt other people because God wouldn't want me to.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And whenever I feel angry or like someone pissed me off a lot, and I feel anger and the need for revenge, then I would still be my mind would stop and be like, okay, God wouldn't want me to hurt this other person, so I'm gonna stop right there.
Mm-hmm.
This is a conscious decision. This is not quote unquote human nature. And human nature would be like act out your instincts. If you're angry, then beat that other guy. If you are hungry, then go eat something. If you're horny, then fuck that bitch.
This podcast has been canceled.
Being conscious or becoming conscious and more aware of things basically gets you to the next level. Like, that's what I believe distinguishes us from animals. Animals would just listen to their instincts and just act them out. But humans can do conscious decisions.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think consciousness is really valuable. And that's my personal belief. That's why we should, the sciences, especially biology, probably physics as well, should thinking more about consciousness and trying to understand it. through religion, I think we've seen that, or through beliefs in general, during human history, I think we've seen that humans can exceed themselves and become something better than they were before. They can become really strong, mentally strong, and endure hardships. I think, for example, when people are fasting, even though they are craving food because they are hungry, they still consciously decide to not eat something. Because some people might do it because they are dieting to lose weight. Some other people might do it because it's their religion. So it's basically always a higher goal.
One of the things about the consciousness is we have something called the subconscious. And when you are trying to, for example, move your arm,
Mhm.
it is almost, I mean, it has to be, right? That the signal, okay, I'm trying to get to, it's really difficult to say, right? But what I'm saying is, if you are trying to move your arm, what happens? Do you subconsciously get the idea that I want to move my arm, and then your subconscious tells your conscious, your brain, okay, I want to move my arm. But where does that come from? Is that, it's like a chicken or the egg? Does it come from your brain telling your arm, okay, I need to move my arm, and your brain is the one who originated the idea? Or is it the opposite, that, you know, to do this action while you're walking, or maybe you're holding a glass or something like that, your subconscious takes care of a lot of those parts for you and tells your brain, hey, make sure you're holding onto that glass, or for example. And I wonder then, where does that come from? Where's the origination? What's the first part? What synapse, for example, starts in the brain first? And what makes that synapse fire? Where do we get this idea to do anything, right?
This is a very, very interesting question. And we kind of have to talk about another topic first, which is learning. When you learn something, the first steps are very conscious. Like, you're paying very, very high attention on the things that you're doing right, and that you're doing wrong. And then you're making conscious decisions on adjustments. For example, if you play table tennis, the way you hold the racket to hit the ball, or the way you're moving, you're making very conscious decisions when you're learning that. But after some time, when you've become a pro, things become subconscious, right? Like, you develop an instinct. And I think that's where we get back to your question. I think consciousness is building the structures in your brain. It's building the synapses that will be there for a longer time. And these neurons, synapses, these are the muscle memory. And that's what subconsciousness is. It's the biology, the neurons that have been built by consciousness, by your conscious decisions during training. So when you're talking about chicken and egg problem, I think the thing that came first is consciousness, and after that, subconsciousness in the form of neurons that are your muscle memory.
Yeah. It's almost like we're able to move parts of actions or parts of sequences into both subconscious and the conscious. So how is that even connected then? So subconscious is supposed to be something that does it regardless of your conscious. So who's in control of that then? You know, I feel like there's so many confusing things regarding this word consciousness, because there is, I forget who the writer is, and I'm sure we could Google this and get it better, but there is, you know, I forget who it is to attribute this to, but there's someone who says, you know, you're summoning the muse, meaning if you're going to sit down and write a song or write a book, you have to sit down, you have to kind of sit in front of your keyboard or typewriter back in the day or whatever, and essentially think about these things and then put it down on paper or make it into a song. And what that was supposed to be is like you have to sit there and actively wait and try to summon the muse, right? And I find that really interesting because if we're always distracted and consuming content, we're not creating content. It's very easy to sit there and consume. We could then instead, like this then, think about it the opposite way. If you're going to try to, instead of consume all the time like we are very good at in the modern era now, if you were to sit and try to be, you know, and create instead, you have to sit there and actively kind of dedicate literal time slots to doing it so that sometimes the muse will come and you will be inspired and you will paint or draw or whatever you're doing, right? And sometimes the muse will take a little bit longer to come, but you have to sit there and wait for it to come. Otherwise, you're never going to put any pen to paper. You're never going to write your book. You're never going to do any of those things. And if that's the case, okay, then where does this muse come from? And is that muse consciousness? I mean, how do we not know that there is, you know, a collective consciousness, and it gets to be put into various bodies, whether it's a cricket or a, you know, or an Udo, for example. You get a certain amount of consciousness put into, or a soul, if you will, and you put that into a body. Then that body has a nature and a nurture experience, right? 50% nature is your, you know, your soul, your Gaia, your consciousness, your sentience. And then you have 50% nurture, which is your experience in life as a form and a body of Udo. But I wonder, what if we're all connected to one piece of consciousness that just kind of slips in, spreads apart, and puts, you know, part of this consciousness into your body, and then you become Udo, and then I get some consciousness, and my name on this planet in this body is called Kim. But maybe you're a cricket, or maybe you're an ant also, because I think those things are also sentient. So I think of it as, what if you, when you get put into a body on this planet right now, for example, you just have various sensitivities and abilities that your body can or cannot do. So your experience is going to be very, very different, and that's what makes you know, you and me, and because we don't remember anything before we were in these bodies, because that's gay kept, it's paywalled. We don't get to find out what's on the other side of it until we pass away, and our consciousness then goes back maybe into whatever pool of consciousness it came from, you know. And I think we talk about this, but not we. I have never done DMT or any of those things that you were saying Joe Rogan does, but that's something that you hear a lot of people who have done talk about, right? That they're like, oh, I feel like I was so connected with everybody and everything, and we are just one. So you hear this woo-woo talk a lot, but even I'm thinking that it's a bit like that as someone who's never experienced any of these drugs. So I have, you know, but I'm still coming to the same conclusion. I feel like that it seems to be going in that way. Because, okay, said differently, everything that is built on this planet, pretty much, like, you know, is man-made. I mean, just look around you in the room or wherever you are right now when you're listening to this. Everything you see around you is just about everything, unless you're looking at trees. But even the trees are shaped by humans. You know, they look a particular way because of humans. Planted in a particular way because of humans, put in a particular spot by humans most of the time, unless you're looking at, like, maybe, you know, forest in your backyard or something like that. But everything you look around is an idea that came from somewhere, we don't even know where, and then it was put into someone's head, and then that person, that body, created the item, and then that's what you're looking at in front of us right now. You know, I'm talking to a microphone that I have no idea how it works, and I have no idea who created it or anything. but it was an
the person
idea
who
at some
created
point.
it, had this idea, and this idea shaped basically everything else, like the design process, the engineering process, the way this person has developed, or this team has developed the microphone. And when you were saying like this soul or this consciousness is kind of like put into someone's body, or I think it's kind of the same as someone believing in a god. Like the ancient Roman, I think every city had their own god or so. I know Minerva, the god of wisdom, had a city that she protected, or the Spartans had the god of war, Mars, I believe, something along those lines, and basically these gods basically shaped the people there. Right? It's just like the social environment, or the god you believe in. If you're religious, is shaping you as well in a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
Like the god of war, like the people that believe in the god of war would probably be very strong in military. They would focus on physical strength and discipline. The god of wisdom, on the other hand, would be more intellectual, and the people that believe in the god of wisdom would read more and be more philosophical and mathematical. And I think these two things are kind of the same thing, like believing in a god that is shaping you, and some consciousness that has been put into your body and that is then shaping you. I think these are basically the same thing, just a different word for it, different way of saying it.
I think so too. And this is one of the things, if we're going back to when people are just, saying, coming back from a DMT trip, for example, they're saying, oh man, it's indescribable. I cannot use any words. It doesn't do it justice. And that's kind of what we're finding, right? Is that we have a language that is very good at describing physical things. It's very good at describing properties. But what if those properties are metaphysical, or very difficult to grasp onto because they're kind of in and out? It's like a dream, for example. A dream, they seem so real when you're dreaming, and then you wake up and you're like, you have to almost remember, like, oh my god, I was dreaming. That was not actually my life. For a split second, that happens, right? That's how convincingly these dreams are. But what is that? What happens to your consciousness when you think for a split second that you were that person in your dream, and thank God maybe that you're like, oh, I wasn't them,
When you're talking about metaphysical, I'm thinking of a idea, like something that's abstract. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
For example, if I'm imagining a perfect circle, okay, I can really think of a perfect circle, but no one in the world can ever draw a perfect circle, because if you zoom in, there will always be some gaps in the paint, some gaps between the atoms.
Yeah.
So in the physical world, there can never be a perfect circle. But in the metaphysical world, the abstract world, whatever you want to call it,
You can imagine yourself a perfect circle.
Yeah. And I think that's the purpose of the metaphysical, or the abstract world. It's not something to become, but something to aim for. Like matter can never become perfect, but it can aim to become perfect. And on the way to perfection, it's suppressing itself. And these abstract ideas, I think gods are one of these abstract ideas. I think God or gods are real, I think they're just abstract ideas.
Mhm.
So you will never find physical evidence, but you will find you will find people that strive to become students of God,
Yeah.
learn from God. Yeah, kind of have a hard time wording this, but I think you get what I mean.
Yeah. And that leads me into the next thing. I have been researching for this episode a little bit about panpsychism. And do you have a good grasp of panpsychism? Do you want to go through it and explain a little bit really quickly what it means? Because I have a few things I want to talk about regarding panpsychism, or if you want, I can do it.
Okay. So panpsychism is basically the belief that everything in the universe is conscious to some degree, and the human mind is basically just the most conscious thing that exists in the universe. But all the other things, like, I don't know, a stone, water, your computer, all of that has some degree of consciousness as well. Even tiny atoms have consciousness. That's basically what panpsychism is saying.
Right. And what would be the reason if first of all, do you subscribe to this idea? What do you think about it?
First thing we have to do is have a definition for consciousness, and I think there's no definition that is generally accepted for consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of have my own definition,
What's your definition? And then I want to throw in mine.
and according to my definition, 3 criteria are needed for an entity to be called conscious.
Okay.
And the first thing is true randomness. And true randomness comes from quantum mechanics.
Okay. True
So-
randomness. So if it's not random, then you would not consider it conscious.
If it
What would you say
doesn't
then? It's
have
designed or built then? Or
deterministic,
deterministic?
yeah. So it's a clockwork. Like if for example,
Now we're talking
Yeah,
about free will.
yeah. Like a clock, it doesn't have free will. Like every movement of that clock,
It's designed.
not only that it's designed, but it has a physical reason behind it. For example, if what was it called? That long thing in a clock.
A longhand? The longhand
Yeah,
or shorthand?
yeah. This thing.
Yeah.
It's called a long hand.
He's showing a picture for right now, and he's showing the shorthand pointing, so the hour clock. So
Oh, okay. So the hands of the clock, they move because there's some gears inside of the clock that are moving.
Yeah.
The reason why the gears are moving is because the clock is powered by a battery. The reason there's power behind that battery is because of electrochemistry, and in determinism, there's always a reason why something happens.
Yeah, it's all
You can
connected.
always trace it back. You can always calculate it.
Ad
basically.
infinitum. Yeah.
Yeah. But I think for free will, there doesn't have to be any reason at all. That's why free will is basically the starting point.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of the thing that I was explaining earlier with consciousness to subconscious. When you during training, your your free will is basically telling you to adjust your movement so you can hit the tennis ball better. And this is then turned into something deterministic, like the structures of your neurons that will then become your muscle memory. And according to my definition of consciousness, these deterministic things are not conscious.
Yeah, they're set in motion by. Do they have to be set in motion by something that is conscious then?
Yes.
Okay, but I have two questions because that's not at all how I view it.
Wait. Hold on to your
Finish
questions.
finish your other two.
Then
yeah,
I'll finish my
good idea.
finish my definition of consciousness. So, in a world where there's only determinism, everything has a reason, then that's something we can talk about later. But there's something called Laplace demon, which is basically someone who knows every piece of information right now, and all the laws of physics could predict the whole future and the whole past. Everything is basically known, and this can only happen in a purely deterministic universe. But scientists have found out that quantum mechanics seems to be a true thing.
Yep.
That the randomness in quantum mechanics is not because the devices that the scientists have aren't accurate enough. It's because that's how nature works. So that's what I'm talking about when I'm talking about true randomness. And
can I just understand a little bit more about this?
Yeah.
So you're saying that once we get to quantum level, the math and how the world breaks down gets real squirrely, and this is true randomness, is what you're saying, yeah?
Yeah, exactly.
I wonder then, my counter to then would be, would you not then think that it's just a lack of our understanding because quantum is so new to us as a human species and a new study, that we just don't have understanding enough to realize what we call now true randomness, but actually it's just not, we're not understanding the deterministic path of it yet. Or B, we don't have tools to even measure these things because we're just starting out with even figuring out what this even is in the first place. So we haven't even designed the tools yet to figure out how to measure these things and get the data and get to figure out what that quote unquote true randomness actually is. Maybe it is not true random once we measure it success with a fine-tuned comb enough, you know?
Yeah, you have a really good point there. Like maybe we're just understanding things not enough. And in the future, when it turns out that quantum mechanics was, it's basically that people didn't have the tools to measure precisely enough, then I would correct myself, and I would then say that Laplace demon can happen, and that we live in a deterministic world. But this would, for me, mean that I don't have free will. That there's always like some reason for the things that are happening, for the decisions that I'm making, and free will doesn't exist. That's the adjustment of belief that I would have to make.
Okay.
If that becomes reality.
Right.
Like, yeah.
That makes sense. That's very logical. You have that makes sense. Okay. All right. So I understand this part. Now you have two more steps, I believe. Yeah.
Yeah. So first thing is true randomness. The second thing is a higher goal to aim for, like the perfect circle that I was trying to draw, for example. And the third thing is awareness. Awareness basically means like some way to measure whether I'm closer or further away from the goal that I've set. So this means I would need eyes to see what I'm painting. I would need hands to paint that perfect circle that I've imagined. Yeah, so according to my definitions, these three things aren't needed. Through randomness, a higher goal, and awareness. And then you have a conscious entity.
Where'd you get this idea from? That's really interesting.
I was thinking about it when I was working. Because like my work doesn't require much brain power, so that's what I do instead.
Well, us, the Kimudo podcast, and the Kimudo podcast listeners, thank you. Okay, thank you for your contribution of having a job that is mind-numbing and brain.
Honestly, I swear, like the most boring jobs at all of my workplaces, the things that everyone else hated. That's what I always loved. Yeah,
that's
like I
amazing.
remember, for example, this machine where I basically just have to stick a piece of metal in, press a button, and wait for it. I absolutely loved it. People hated it because you're doing the same thing like thousands of times per day, and for me it was perfect. It was like I'm always imagining when I when I do like these brainless jobs, it's basically a babysitter for my body, and my mind can go somewhere else. That's what I think of it.
That's interesting. I thought I was like that when I was 17 and I got my first job. My ideal like job that I could think of was like a security guard in some booth for a gated community. You know, you don't do shit all day. I was like, I can watch, YouTube, because I don't think Netflix existed back then. Probably, actually, I don't even know if YouTube existed either. It would have been like Google videos. Now I'm really showing my age. But then I got a warehouse job as one of my first jobs, and I worked there for 5.5 years driving a cherry picker myself. And it was about as mind-numbing as the job could possibly be. And for the first 2 years or so, I thought this is great because I can learn things, I can focus on other things. But then about the next 3.5 years, I was wanting to jump off that cherry picker every day. It was just my brain cannot handle not having a challenge to think about constantly. So since that job, I never took a job again that didn't require just about my full focus for at least big parts of most days. I mean, having breaks and things are nice, but no, I need actively things to think about, like this podcast, for example. It's perfect. It keeps me stimulated.
Dude, don't destroy my hopes, man. Maybe in 3 years I will be like that as well.
How long were you doing that, or are you still doing that, or?
Yeah, I had various different jobs, but most of them were like brainless. So
They were like this. Oh, so you have a pattern. Okay, so
Love
you're
it.
probably. Hey, look! Thank God for people like you. Thank God for people who are different, right? What some of us would consider, torture. You're like perfect. More time to think.
Someone has to flip the burgers, right?
Yeah, absolutely they do. Thank
You're
goodness.
welcome.
Absolutely. Thank you. You're doing everybody a great service. So, okay, if I may, then we definitely want to go back into panpsychism, because I'm definitely not done with it. But I didn't realize we need to get into kind of this definition. But of course we do. Because mine, and I'm glad you are, because you're pointing out that we don't have the same definition at all. To me, my definition of it is either the word sentient, meaning you are kind of like you're saying your third point, which is awareness to me. If you are aware, it's kind of like the Descartes quote, I think, therefore I am, René Descartes. Yeah. That's how I think about it. It's either sentient, or I would define it as kind of as experience, maybe. Because that they kind of go hand in hand. If you are something that can go through experiences or are having experiences, you are conscious. That's how I define it. Or if you're sentient, it means you are again aware, right? You are alive enough to know that you are there, and you are perceiving things. Maybe that's maybe a way of saying it. You're perceiving things.
What does perceiving mean?
It means you have a connection to your environment, I think.
Okay, so when I personally think about perceiving, when I'm watching a sunset, for example, and I'm perceiving it in the sense of I see the light from the sunset, and that information gets processed in my brain.
Through your icicles, dude, and then into your brainsicle. Yeah.
Yes, and what's the difference from me perceiving the sunset versus a camera perceiving it? Light also comes into the camera lenses, and then it's get processed by the microchips in there. What's the difference?
I guess it's a bit of the camera doesn't know it is taking a photo. It's not there. It's not aware. It's not even perceiving it. It's doing a mechanical function.
So you're also saying, what I'm saying basically is that consciousness is not something that's deterministic or mechanical.
Correct. I do agree with that part. Like, for example, with panpsychism, I do not believe that, for example, rocks are sentient or have experiences. I don't believe that a camera or a monitor are alive, quote unquote, or can perceive things, which is what panpsychism says, right? That they would just argue that they are, in fact, alive. It's just that their sensors or their way of perceiving the world is very, very muted or low. Because you take something and you make it into something else, for example, you don't know what properties of perceiving it has left, if even if it's even measurable. But panpsychism would argue that there is measurable, we just don't have tools for it. Everything has consciousness, and I don't believe that. I believe a bit more in like you're tying your determinism in, that some things are sentient, and those sentient things are the ones that are the movers of this universe. We're the ones who can, and I mean that means that's it all the way from a gecko. A gecko has influence on its environment because it exists just by nature of that sentient being, like a bearded dragon in the desert. Just by that being alive, it changes the course of the world, right? And then maybe there's an eagle, and he also changes the course of history. But on the other hand, a rock, it does not change the course of history. It only follows whatever sentient things do to set that rock in motion, or whatever else that happens to it,
Okay, so if I would be asking someone who believes in panpsychism, that guy would say that the rock is a little bit conscious. Like,
Yeah.
if you would basically give everything points for consciousness, then that rock would have like 2 points of consciousness, and humans would have like 1,000,000 points of consciousness.
Yes, that's exactly what I think that they would say. Yeah.
So humans who are more sentient or conscious, they can manipulate the rock. So question is, what if there's something that is more sentient than humans?
And that's what I want to say exactly.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah, we're getting to this. Okay, good. We're connecting. Yeah, because we're going to the same exact place. Okay, great. That's exactly what I think too. I wonder if this, thing that I called the muse earlier, that you summon to create things.
Shit.
What if that's because that's what it is at the end of the day, is we don't know what inspired or made us do almost anything, right? Like, for example, when we're talking about this podcast right now, why are we making this podcast? Well, you can say you and I, we have an interest in this podcast, and we have, we like each other, and we have good conversation, and we decided we're going to make a podcast. But I think more like it's missing the fact that we came up with this idea, and usually when people create something, people who paint or do any kind of creative endeavor, usually, not always, but many people, they give credit to God, or they give credit to all these things. Say Allah is number one, and I first and foremost have to think, you know what I mean? You have heard these things. Why is it that it feels like these things don't come? It's not us doing it. Why does it feel when you're doing these, when you're expressing yourself, it feels like we want to credit something else, like God, if you're religious, for example. It doesn't feel like we do them, right? It feels like it comes from them. And I wonder, maybe that's the biggest consciousness of all. Maybe that's the most sentient thing of all. Is the one thing that, I said puts consciousness into these various bodies. That's the most, and we can't even see it. We don't even know what makes us do these things and influences us this way. And that is maybe the most, that's why maybe there's so much talk about religion and God, and when we die we see these things, and we, because maybe there's a bit of a connection to that consciousness back again. And when we come back to our bodies again, we have only the language that we have, which is very good at describing physical properties, not describing metaphysical. There are, for example, we know that there are colors that our human eyes can't see. There are colors that we can't imagine, right? Because you cannot imagine that's color. But there are colors that exist that we just can't perceive. Like, what do you do with that information? That's about as good as I can describe it to you. Imagine a color that doesn't exist right now, okay? Well, not that it doesn't exist, but imagine a color that you can't see, okay?
Ultraviolet.
Sure, exactly. Yeah. Well,
How does that look like?
Well, UV light, ultraviolet light, yeah, you can't see it directly, but I think many people think of black lights when you say that. But yeah, if you're thinking about like what is the color of a gamma ray or something, maybe like, if you can't perceive it, our language breaks down. It just demonstrates that our language is very good, but it's used for cavemen. It's used for when we went from grunts to words to symbols to reading symbols on a page to then transferring knowledge this way. But it's made from this planet. If we had, for example, imagine if we had if we could telepathically communicate instead.
Ooh, that reminds me of Neuralink.
Then that would be consciousness, If you could telepathically, that would be consciousness kind of connecting us both there if we had that as an ability, for example. But we didn't evolve that way because those properties didn't exist as we evolved, through being Neanderthals and then monkeys and eventually walking upright. You're showing me, you're looking up something, the Plato's allegory of the cave. Okay, yeah, the very famous. Yeah, of course, that. Very famous. Okay, yeah, it started with the Greek philosopher Plato, who had they were stuck in caves because they were hiding out from the elements and whatever else, and they were seeing shadows being thrown on the wall, which made them get proof, right, that there was danger, I believe, outside, and they were describing these things, and then once they get outside, they realized that this has kind of been a mistake this whole time to not actually go outside and get that data, right? Or am I explaining this completely wrong? If I am, we're cutting this part out. JK, we don't. Just gonna be wrong. Go ahead.
Okay, so in this allegory, humans are basically in a cave, and there's a light source in this cave, but the only things that the people in the cave can see are the shadows of objects in front of that light source, and every time they see a shadow, they hear a word for it, and then they call it that. So if they see the shadow of they see the shadow of a cube, for example, then they would hear cube, and then they would associate that with a cube. When they see the shadow of a sword, then they hear the word sword, and then that shadow is what they would call sword. Okay. What this allegory is trying to say is the shadows are the shadows in this allegory are basically the things that we can perceive, but the reality is much more. It's not only the shadow, it's also the depth of the object, the 3D-ness of the object, the inside of the object, the color of the object. All of these are things that
the tactile feel of the object.
Exactly, and all of that are things that the people in the cave weren't capable of perceiving. But once they exited the cave and they saw sunlight, they were able to touch the things, to feel the things, and see the 3D structure of these things. Then they were basically enlightened. They would understand the world in a deeper way, and that's kind of the thing that you said earlier, that we don't have the words to describe it. We don't have the ways to perceive the true reality yet. And maybe in the future we will have better language, better tools to capture or measure or perceive reality.
If there's one thing science seemingly consistently do, if you just like zoom out, look at human species as a thing, one of the things we do is we keep developing technology, and therefore as a result we also get better instruments and tools to measure these things. So if there's one thing I think we can reliably expect us to continue doing, is getting better measurements on these things, and that's good. How do you feel about this podcast? Do you feel like you take 100% credit for what we're doing, the ideas that we come up with? You and I, we sit many hours every week, right, discussing how to make this podcast better, what we're going to discuss, streamlining various issues that come up. How do you feel about it? Do you feel like, yeah, I am in charge, I'm the one who makes these decisions, there are nothing controlling me, these ideas are my own, I'm the one who originated the problem solving? Or do you feel like there's a mix, or do you feel like, no, you give all that credit to something else that we don't yet understand? Or where do you lie on this percentage of how much credit do you take for your creative endeavor?
Well, I have no idea where the hell my ideas come from. Yeah, sometimes they just pop up. Like, I don't know, I'm doing the dishes or I'm doing some brainless stuff, and then I just have a random idea. Like, you could say, yeah, this idea has been planted into me by something higher or so, or by my subconsciousness or so. I don't know that, but I do know that I consciously decide to pursue that idea. Like, I'm judging if this idea is good or not, and then when we sit down in meetings, and discuss that, and then kind of like structure and build these ideas into something real. Yeah, that's when I'm in charge of things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. To me, I think about it as the mind-body problem. You break it down. You need the consciousness, and you need also the physical actions of the body to manipulate its environment. And without both, you actually don't create the computer monitor, or you don't actually create the podcast, or you don't start or go anywhere. So there are some parameters that need to be met. Also, of course, you need to be able to have physical time to do it. You need to have been, of course, you can't be starving, and have these basic safety things you got to be met. But after that, yeah, I feel the same. That I also don't know where these things come from, because you say, okay, well, maybe it was your subconscious that fed it to your conscious, okay, and then that's where your idea came from, okay. But then my next question again goes, ontologically, okay, but then who fed my subconscious that idea? Where did that come from? It just randomly fired, thought it was a good idea to feed to the main brain, and the main brain agreed, and then we did the thing. How is the subconscious, which is subconscious by definition, not an active thinker? It's not the brain, right? It's not logical. It's not blah blah. How come then? How many signals does the subconscious send to the conscious brain about doing things that then the conscious brain vetoes? And how many times are we not in control, and our conscious brain doesn't veto that much shit at all, and maybe we just follow our limbic brain, or our very lizard part of the brain. I feel like I know some people who actually follow this part, so I know some of those people who I think actually fit into this description. But and then if that's the case, if you're an intelligent person with a higher IQ or whatever, say whatever you measure as a smarter person, are they then is their brain then just better at differentiating between the subconscious signals it continually sends to the brain to do this, that, and the other, and it's better at vetoing things.
I think that's a sign of high mind-body integrity or connectivity, that you are capable of putting ideas into action. Now, some people, they're just talking, but there's no action behind it. These kinds of people would be people with low mind-body connection.
Yeah, because it leads me to the next thing that I think about then is, okay, if you have a person who is, let's say, kind of low IQ, for example, and they would they this is so, maybe this is mean and I shouldn't use this, but would they measure lower in consciousness then? Like, just like again, sorry for this. I'm apparently going even deeper. But compared to a rock, then we were talking about panpsychism. If you take someone who's maybe a bit slow and measure consciousness on a rock compared to a slow person, compared to a building, compared to a TV monitor, compared to a bearded dragon that we talked about, would they measure differently in conscience, or not conscience, but consciousness? If you're, you see what I'm saying? What if you're sleeping? Are you lower? Would you measure lowering consciousness then? Because you're not all there, because we need this mind-body connection that you're talking about. If you're in a coma, are you less conscious?
You are unconscious.
So does that mean that we are more and less conscious throughout the day, depending on what mood we're in, what we're feeling like, if you slept well, if you're sleeping currently or not, or what if you're anesthetized and you are under anesthesia, and you're in surgery, are you less conscious then? I mean, of course you're not awake, so you are less conscious by that definition, but you would measure lower in consciousness then. So it's interesting to think about then. Has anyone ever talked about how people can then measure more or less conscious depending on?
It was literally what you are measuring in EEGs, right?
Right. How many brain waves?
How many brainwaves and how
Frequency and strength, right?
Yeah, exactly. There's a couple of different, and for example, the delta waves
But just,
are
I don't want to cut you off, but isn't
Yeah.
this just the physical? Again, isn't this just a physical measurement? I'm talking about the metaphysical consciousness. This just measures that there's a physical pulse sent by your brain.
uh-huh.
This isn't exactly a measurement of consciousness. It's a measurement of a physical, deterministic signal that's being sent by our body that keeps us alive whether we want to or not, right? Because it does it without your permission.
Okay. I think I slowly get what you mean.
Yeah.
In case of person who's in a coma, you could
Right.
say the consciousness is still there, but the mind-body connection has been cut.
Yes.
So the mind is still there, but it's just not connected to the body.
Right. What about someone who's in a horrible accident or something and they're brain dead, but their body works?
GG,
In
go next.
panpsychism, they would say you're everything has a consciousness, right? That's what panpsychism would say. But what if you're brain dead? Did you then lose a significant part of your consciousness?
I think in some cases that's the case. And then okay, it might sound brutal, but in these kinds of cases, then it's okay to pull the plug. It's okay to turn off the machines, but it's really hard to tell. Like we can't just look into someone's brain, someone's consciousness, and see if there's something there or not.
We should have a tool like this, maybe. This
We
is bananas that we are pulling plugs on people every day across the world because we quote unquote deem them not recoverable. But if you could measure that someone who, you would almost pull the plug on compared to someone else who you'd almost pull the plug on, what if they measured extremely different in consciousness, for example? Would that change your mind? Would that change your mind on pulling the plug?
That's a really tough decision.
Right? They're like, oh yeah, well, we have this machine that measures consciousness, and you measure 300 per blah blah blah. Okay, but your grandma here, she's, we know she's brain dead, we know she's not coming back, but for some reason she measures 3,000. So we think that she's really conscious. Of course, she's brain dead, so she's not, she's significant percentage from what she was, but she's very much here, okay? And this will be a doctor saying this to you in the future. What the hell do you do? But it's demonstrating that the mind-body connection is very, very important because, yeah, even if you would then theoretically measure very high on consciousness on this brain-dead person, they're not coming back anyway. And you need that mind-body. You cannot be unhealthy, even if you rate really high on consciousness, for example.
Assuming that measuring device really works and it can really measure levels of consciousness, would it make sense to upload someone's consciousness to kind of save it?
Yeah, there's a Black Mirror episode on this. And it's awesome, where they do this exact same thing. Spoiler alert, I won't say which episode or anything, but yeah, they upload you into kind of a simulation as before you pass, so that your loved and family can come and visit you, and then that's also where you live in the simulation going forward. It's a great episode. For anyone who hasn't watched Black Mirror, it's a bit dark, but it's a great show, for sure.
Would you do that? Upload yourself?
No, because you're limited by technology. Then, so what if anything technologically happens that makes it a torture for you? You have to think about it. If it's in all infinity. No, thank you. I'm good. I'm happy with my experience. I think what makes life so great in so many ways is that it is finite. It's what gives us urgency. It is part of what consciousness is. Why would an AI wake up and do anything? It has no sense of urgency because it's not going to die. It can't, so it has no sense of urgency, but humans do. So I value the experience that we get from our consciousness distributors out there. Thank you. 10 out of 10 would do the simulation again. What about panpsychism, and what would they say about ghosts? Is that consciousness? What if ghosts, is that some leftover consciousness, for example? And what would panpsychism say that? You can't measure or see where these ideas come from, but we have, photos, witnesses of ghosts. So it literally is kind of defined as more measurable, right? Because you can't take a picture of consciousness, but we have taken pictures, quote unquote, of, things that maybe are like ghosts or whatever else. They could be faked, of course. I don't know. I don't have a story about it necessarily, but I just wonder what would panpsychism say about ghosts? Is that some remnant consciousness that's left over, or assuming they're working, assuming it's correct and that it's that okay. There is one story. Of my old boss. He had. This is going a little bit on a side story. Do you want to hear the story about? It's a ghost story. It has a little to do with consciousness, but it makes me think about it. It's funny as hell. Okay.
Okay, tell me.
Yeah. Okay. I have no personal experience with ghosts. I'm very open personally. I would like to see or meet a ghost or something like that, just to have that experience. But I've always been open to it. But I've never had this experience. But many people in my life have had experiences that they've shared with me. And one of them was my old boss. It was an old friend of the family's dad. And he used to have this security guard job when he was younger. And he would walk through this big building. Think of it like a big office building or something like that. It's very, very old and it's circular. Okay, so think of like a round pentagon or something like that, except remove the military part. And the hallway is round and it's very there's a certain amount of distance, then there's a set of doors, and then there's a certain amount of distance, and then there's a set of doors, and that's how it kind of continues going around. You can walk in this circle. And my old boss and my old friend's dad, he would go through rounds, and he would work at night. And he would go through these doors as part of his security detail and make sure that there were no kids that were running through the halls or anything like that or breaking in, and everything was Gucci. And so he said, over the years you work there, he goes, you're gonna get used to everything, right? He knows his job very well because he's done it and walked these rounds, thousands of times, I imagine. So when he walks through the first set of doors, he knows how many steps he gets until the doors close and what they sound like. He knows what each and every set of door closes sounds like. And and if you walk around this circle, okay, it does not perfectly go around. It stops at one of the ends, okay? So you have to walk a perfect circle, and then basically at the end of that circle, you turn around, and then you walk maybe upstairs because there's more floors, etc. And he would walk through these sets of stairs, and he heard young kids. I don't know how young teenagers maybe. I hope that's what he said to me, but something like that. Maybe skater ages, young kids like that. He hears them laughing, several of them, and they're ahead of him through the sets of doors. And he can barely hear them, at the beginning. But as he walks through the sets of gates of the sets of doors, he hears the voices getting a little bit stronger. So he knows he's getting closer and closer to them. And as he keeps walking towards them, he knows, one, that they're going to be stuck because all these doors, they're all locked, okay, except for this main hallway. So at the end of it, he is going to catch them. So there's no running. There's no need to do anything drastic. He knows that at the end of it, he's going to have a talk with these skaters and kick them out. And as he walks through these doors don't close at the same time that they're supposed to. They close at random times, and some of them, I think, even went faster, like slamming a little bit or closing at an abrupt rate, meaning that some of these doors were closing at very quickly, and some of them were very slow. And all of these doors, they're all serviced at the same time, and normally they were always closing at this exact same time, And he keeps walking towards these kids, and every set of doors, he just hears them getting closer and closer, and then now he can start making out what they're saying, I think, even right before he gets to the second set of last set of doors. And then he gets through those doors, and at the end of it, of course there are no kids, and he's surprised because he knows that he didn't slip by them, and there was nothing. And he is a man that I've known. I knew him for years, and he was an ex-military man. He went through one of our prestigious military schools in Sweden, in Stockholm, I believe. And he's a no-nonsense guy. He's not a guy who made up things, or he's a serious guy. Cracks jokes, of course, but he was a serious guy that you took seriously when he talked. And he said this, and when he's talking about it, I guess he's getting uncomfortable, and this is a man that I had never seen uncomfortable, but this real experience had him shook because it didn't make sense. It was just nonsensical, and he never did get an answer for what happened there. So, and nothing was broken, no windows, nothing like that. So there were no kids in there. Weird, right?
Really creepy.
So what is that? Okay, and you hear people in, I'm sure listeners to this podcast have people in their lives that they consider credible, like, friends and family, or even their dad and mom, or even themselves have experiences with ghosts. What is that? Is that consciousness that streams through, or is it unrelated, perhaps completely? I have no idea. I think about this because, okay, to tie it up together. For example, we know that we're figuring out very, very much right now that our gut bacteria in our stomachs make up who we are and how we think a lot, right? They're saying now that maybe the more the more you're mistreating, or you have an irregular gut biome, the more likely you are to be depressed and all these things. And I wonder, okay, so all these bacteria, I would probably consider these bacteria sentient, even though low sentient. And I wonder if we have if all those bacteria, you know what I mean, like make up who I am. I'm called Kim, right? But we all know I'm made up of millions of cells. I'm made up of millions of bacteria. I am a conglomerate of things. But then we call that conglomerate thing Kim, and we say it's one, quote unquote, one consciousness in there. But that's not true. I'm controlled literally by my gut biome, and that influences how I think, and it influences my depression, for example, supposedly, right? According to the latest peer-reviewed data, medical data. And so I'm not really, I am more of a collective. Everybody's collective. You know, they say we have like these little bugs on our eyelids that we can't see, and all this other stuff. But I wonder then, you know, when consciousness gets put into these various bodies, whether it's a bacteria or a million bacteria in my gut biome, and you have a million small little consciousness put in, I wonder if how it works when that consciousness gets severed from the mind body. Does it go back to the consciousness collective of where it came from? And we've seen in studies that people, when they have severed brain halves, they think and come to even two, like the same brain but two brain halves. They will, if they're split, they start making separate decisions. And that makes sense to me because they have separate experiences, right? So they're going to, but they're saying when they put the brain together again, it starts making similar decisions again as it did before the split, meaning that supposedly, quote unquote, kind of consciousness, it can be split and can be put together as well. And that's kind of proof of what we are in a human. Without my gut bacteria, I literally would be dead. I literally wouldn't be called Kim because I'd be dead. So I have to give them a lot of credit. So shout out to my gut biome. You guys are doing a hella good job. Thank you for this. But I don't think they're deterministic. You know what I mean? I don't think that bacteria is not alive and viruses are not alive. I think they are. And they're integral. And it's weird that we have this consciousness split into all these things.
In that case, I wonder what's going on with people that have multiple personality disorder. Like it's kind of
Oh yeah.
like when you said the brain that has been cut in half and then it's making different decisions, it's kind of similar to multiple personality disorders. It's just that one brain half is taking over in that case.
Yeah.
And in case of these disorders, the brain doesn't even have to be physically separated. Apparently, it can. In these cases, it can be separate in a different way.
Yeah.
I've also heard that our brains, like the left brain and the right brain, they have different functions. The left brain is for like logical thinking, and the right brain is for like more emotional stuff, I believe, or intuition.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's kind of a good teamwork.
Yeah.
So this basically collective conscious, it's more powerful. And when we keep spinning this, basically, so one human being is the collective conscious of all the cells in it, and the collective consciousness of many humans, like basically the groupthink, that's an entire civilization.
Right. That's I bit
That's
what
the next level, kind of. The next level of consciousness, basically.
I mean, unless that's already what we are, right? Just like all the bacteria are, you know, my consciousness kind of. Maybe that's what happened. Maybe that's what the difference between you and I is, that really we just need to zoom out, because humans are a certain size. We are at certain zooming in and zooming out in our cognition and our thinking. And because bacteria is really small, we have a hard time kind of thinking about it that way. But if we zoom out, maybe what those DMT trips are trying to say, you know, which is we are all one, maybe they got it right. Maybe that's what all that consciousness is that it's just like all the millions of bacteria that are all little sentient things inside of my stomach. Just like that, all the billions of people on this human planet, we're all also one consciousness, maybe. Because if you think about it, how many planets that are out there, how many billions and billions and billions of galaxies, has trillions of galaxies. If you think about it that big, all 8 billion, 7 billion, whatever, how many, 9 billion, however many people we are on this planet, I should know that. Maybe we are really one consciousness, but because you and I can interact and humans are really quite small in the scheme of things, we think of ourselves as separate. I think of you are you and you are responsible for your actions. But really, maybe we are maybe 50% of you is your consciousness and it literally is the same as mine. We're just, the other 50% was all experience and nurture and that made you why you think like you do and why I think like I do.
But the thing about a collective consciousness is that it has to be united. Like there has to be a same goal. Otherwise, it can't move. This is basically. Have you seen pictures of snakes that have two heads?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Like they have trouble moving because they cannot decide.
Mm-hmm.
Like you could say, yeah, they have two brains, so they have more brain power. But like if they can't decide, then they are less efficient than a snake with only one brain.
Yeah.
So in that sense, a collective human consciousness has to be the same in the sense of it has to have a common direction, a common goal. Otherwise, it can't decide and is less efficient.
Right. And our bodies, to connect it to the consciousness, has to be a certain size as well, meaning one body for one consciousness also. Because otherwise, we're not functioning, we're not surviving and adapting through evolution very well. Because a two brain snake with one body is not very likely to survive in the wild. So there is definitely like a number for consciousness based on body size. That is appropriate.
And when we were thinking about our brain that has a left side and a right side, but both of them, like each of them, has a different function when things work again. Like the two-headed snake, for example, each of them is trying to take control of the body, right? They kind of pursue the same function. So that doesn't work because there will be indecisiveness. But if each head of that double-headed snake has a different function,
right, a
then
domain
things would work again.
Yeah, or like an
Just like
individual
brain.
bacteria in my gut biome versus a million of them. Yeah, if I had one gut bacteria and it had a million heads instead of a million bodies. Yeah, it would characteristically not work and look the same at all in nature.
Yeah, and for the collective human consciousness, I'm kind of thinking of checks and balances right now, like the judicial, legislative, and executive. These are basically like three brain halves that are each taking over a different job, and that's why things can work.
Right. So does that mean we have a certain amount of consciousness that our bodies can hold? Like imagine that if you were a different body, a different entity, like an elephant, and maybe there's a million more sentient life forms or consciousness that is associated with that large of a body, being an elephant. Do you wonder then if that mind body problem can only, because of the amount of sensors and perceiving that you can do due to the limitation of your body, being an elephant, pros and cons to being an elephant. You have certain sensors and consciousness that can hold and be fit into there. So
are you trying to say a bigger body can hold more consciousness?
no, not exactly. That maybe is a bad. I'm just meaning that a physically larger body, I imagine, has the chance for more life forms to be associated with it. That's what I mean just that. So I just mean that if you have something with a lot of different consciousness that we call, quote unquote calls one unit instead of a conglomerate. Like if you put one consciousness into an elephant's brain, that's one consciousness.
Uh-huh.
But maybe there are like a billion mites that live on the skin of this elephant. And each mite, of course, then would have a consciousness, a limited one, but a consciousness because I consider it to be sentient and alive. Then you can only fill a mite up with a certain amount of consciousness because the body are limited in amount of sensors that it has.
Oh, I think you're cooking right now. Like, I think you're getting into something. So you're not trying to say it's the size of the body, but the amount of kind of memory and computation power that this mind has.
Yes, compared to qualitative versus quantitative. Yes, how much sentient stuff you put in a qualitative brain versus a quantitative where you have to have like a lot of different things to support that one structure, you know, because we know that some of these mites, maybe that elephant can't live without those mites being on that skin, you know, because then certain functions don't get done or whatever. So you need a certain amount of sentient things structured differently for that elephant for him to survive and be called an elephant.
Would you then also say when we as humans can, I don't know, plug in when we as human beings, for example, can plug in a USB cable and then connect to a supercomputer, then we become more sentient?
Well, I believe that these computers are not sentient yet, so it wouldn't matter for me if you connect one non-sentient thing to another non-sentient thing.
No. Like, if I connect to a supercomputer.
Oh,
I'm
okay.
so it's not connecting.
Oh, my bad.
I mean,
oh, my
you
bad.
could
I didn't
say
know. I didn't know
I'm
we're
not
connecting your
sentient,
brain
but,
ass into it. Well, if you connect your sentient butt into an AI, okay, then no, I would not give the AI sentient. I would just say that you're controlling.
You're more sentient. Like I am more sentient in that case. No.
No, I wouldn't say so. It would be more like, let's say you took. I would say like this: if you, if you, this is more like what I mean. If you were to eat probiotics, you know that Activia, it has a bunch of probiotics, and you get that healthy gut biome that I'm talking about. Okay, if you consume this, you now have more sentient, alive things in your stomach than if you did not consume it. And then they're part of you now, right? They're gonna keep living in your gut biome unless you treat your gut biome horribly. But they're now part and they're functioning and they're doing that function for you. And now technically you have more consciousness, maybe, you know, in your body. You are more conscious by eating Activia. Hashtag not sponsored. Hashtag Activia sponsor our podcast. Kimudo podcast. Thank you. Activia gives you life, is what I'm saying. Yeah, that's good. That's the best commercial they're ever gonna get, I think. Okay, so what about this? What about, as you know, I'm obsessed with AI. What would you consider it needing as an ingredient for you to consider AI gaining consciousness, so it becoming sentient and aware of itself?
Wait a minute. I kind of want to stick with your Activia example.
Okay. I thought I was okay. Let's stick with this.
No, I was just busy laughing. That's why I had to mute myself. What you're describing is kind of to me it sounds like having two different consciousness in one body. Okay. Again, the problem is like the double-headed snake. where just because you have two more minds doesn't mean that things work well together. It might just end up become a body that's very indecisive. So adding more consciousness doesn't necessarily mean becoming something better. But rather,
I don't even know what better would mean, to be honest with you. I just mean, yeah. What would you mean with better than anyway? Is more consciousness having more consciousness or more sentient things as part of your ecosystem, quote unquote, body? Is that better?
I'd say a higher level of consciousness is better. Like you're making more wise decisions, and if I connect to a supercomputer, for example, then I can always pull up a calculator. I can do some simulations to make a better decision. That's what I would call a higher level of consciousness, compared to like having more consciousness in my body by eating more Activia.
Sponsorship ruined.
We always find a way to cancel also.
Yeah. We weren't canceled this episode yet, so we did actually really good. We haven't said anything too bananas yet, so
yeah, it was time.
It was good. It was good. It was nice. It was nice for a few minutes there. I thought we had a chance. Okay, so because if you believe in panpsychism, then right, you would already believe that the AI is conscious. So that would throw everything on into a weird. Panpsychism is such a weird one to me. Why is this a thing? Why is this such a big thing? If you Google consciousness, panpsychism is one of them that come up early. It's one of the main or bigger theories. And I find it such a strange one.
I would say this field of consciousness is not very deeply developed yet.
Agreed.
So it's always worth it to have different ideas and then see what happens. We have no idea which direction will be the right direction, but each direction might give us some clues.
Yeah, and each direction should be explored as well, just to find out that it is a dead end, and then so you move back and you continue trying to stack knowledge blocks so you build the foundation.
Yeah.
And you only find that by following these clues and these ideas to the point where they naturally probably end, or where yeah.
And that's why the scientific approach is so important. I really find evidence. Like you can't just say a bunch of things that are not falsifiable. That's not science. That's, I don't know, some flat Earth conspiracy theory also.
Hashtag unlucky, hashtag flat Earth shade. But I think that just goes into proof one more time that what you're saying now is also why we have shitty language and why we have shitty descriptors of these things. Because what you're saying is we need quote unquote proof, and these proofs are physical. They're always something we can see, sense, measure, blah, blah, blah. And metaphysical, immaterial things, we don't have the tools for it. So we're trying to shove a square block through a triangle hole, okay? We're pretty stupid about this. We need to figure out how maybe this is what Neuralink and all that stuff will solve in the future. Once you and I can telepathically talk to each other through Neuralink, and we have our subscriptions to make sure that our brains don't shut off, because 1984 and yeah. What about thought crime? That'll be stopped immediately as well. It'll be just blocked. This is not true information. You're not allowed to say that, and then just stop. Anyway, just joking. But once we send information to each other that way, ideally it's not going to be words that you and I are sending to each other, but it'll be thoughts, ideas, and feelings, because that'll be the more raw input. We've used language as a tool, so we're kind of stuck in thinking everything has to be language in the future. But I think what I'm demonstrating right now is that these are they're limited by a great many things, and if we could then instead psychologically send information back and forth between each other, then maybe we would have more misunderstandings. Maybe I couldn't lie anymore to you because you'll feel that I'm lying to you, or you'll feel the context that comes with this information share. And maybe that information share is much more. You know how, like, when we talk on the internet right now, or if I take a photo, you have all this meta data, right? You have all this sub data that comes with an image, or that comes with sending a data. It'll be measured through servers, and there's a footprint for it. And I imagine that that's words. And you and I are particularly bad at words. We are very limited to the physical world and very limited to the descriptors that we understand it. And they're shitty because when I say words to you, we just described that we can't even agree necessarily exactly. We pretty much agree, but we don't have exactly the same agreements on what consciousness and being sentient is, even, because you're taking it through your filter of your experience that seems to be true to you, and I'm doing the same thing and that seems to be true to me, and then we don't exactly necessarily agree. But what if we sent information through Neuralink or telepathically in the future, and it comes with all this context, it comes with feelings, it comes with, so you can feel when I'm sending this information to you, I have a slight anxiety because you can feel that I'm nervous about this decision or this information that I'm telling you. Maybe like, I think we're gonna need so much more metadata in the future to give more context, so that in the future when I say something and I use that and I send that over to you, you're going to exactly feel and understand and know what it is where I'm coming from. Instead of just words where I could lie and I could feel the exact opposite of how I feel. I could tell you, I'm really scared right now, Udo. I'm really, really scared. But what you're using right now is you hear my voice and my intonation, and you probably are deferring from your experience that I'm lying right now. Yeah?
Yeah.
You don't actually think I'm afraid. So you are using context clues already. It's just that it didn't come from language. And I think in the future, all this metadata that we're going to figure out how to send more context with our information over to you, it'll be much more put into context, so that you will understand and receive my message the way I meant it, the way I felt it when I sent it to you. So words are stupid. They're a bad technology. They're an outdated technology. Because it's flamed too much by culture and influence in our mind-body problem, and et cetera, et cetera. Because probably we should have in the future is something that's closer to our consciousness, like a tool that min-maxes the consciousness, and then from there try to use that to send information instead of going with the physical and the body. That's kind of the wrong end of it. But of course we ended up there, because we were Neanderthals. We had to build these things, and we cannot invent something that isn't really physical. So we did you know what I mean? Like, when we start this podcast, the very first thing you have to do is record some episodes, so that we have something, and you have to do certain things in certain order. But then once we've gone there, we have to evolve and move it. Another analogy is this: when you're a kid, for example, you have really fast reflexes and great instincts, right? Why? Because you don't have experience yet to keep you alive. So instincts do a great job of substituting this. But as you get older and as you get wiser, you learn that, okay, my instincts are also tricking me all the time. Just because you hear some loud sound, we get scared and we jump, right? That's a shitty instinct. If you find out after with your conscious brain that, it was just someone who clapped a hand really loud and you were not actually in danger, but for a split second you thought you were in danger. So we learn that conscious thought needs to be moved more from instinct. And the same thing I think with this. We should move from our physical world that we are so attached to, our material things that you were talking about, our measurements and tools, our scientific study, all of this stuff. I don't want to sound woo-woo and we need to go to, we all need to go to the spirit world. No, that's not what I'm saying. But I'm saying maybe we need to move on from this physical language and this physical world to try to figure out how do we get good data on this consciousness, and because that's kind of the meaning of life, right? If we figure that out somehow, we would know where we come from, what the purpose is, and all that stuff,
What's the meaning of life?
What's the meaning of life?
1, 2, 3, go.
What he's saying there is that's actually the very first time Udo and I met. We met on a Discord, And we were playing a game. We were playing League of Legends, of course, on an ARAMs. And the very first time, he noticed me because we were playing with 5 people were total. We were 5, so 3 other people together. I said pretty much like hi to everybody, and then I said, "What's the meaning of life?" And 1, 2, 3, go. And from that point on, Udo added me on, I think it was on Discord, probably the game as well, and sent me some messages. And yeah, the rest is history. We've been friends ever since.
Dude, the first time I heard that, I was like, "Who the fuck is that guy?" This is not a normal question to ask. Like everyone would be like, "Yo, what's your main champion? Hey, what are you doing today? How old are you? Or what kind of job do you work? What are you studying in college right now?" Like,
No, not even your
this guy
name.
gets straight to the point.
We're
And at
loading
that
into a
point, I knew.
game. Nobody's thinking about this. And my question is, all right, and what's the meaning of life? 1, 2, 3, go, and go.
At that point, I knew exactly. Like I could talk to this guy for hours. I mean, literally just the other day, we were talking about the podcast till 3 a.m. or so.
Yep.
And this is something that happens on a regular basis.
Yeah, it does, and I love it. I wouldn't want it any other way. I'm so thankful that that random question was appreciated by somebody, and that you know, you saw it out and you wrote me, because I think otherwise it would have been, you know, we would have played that game and then we would have never talked again, because that is the case with most people when you're playing, you know, an ARAM. Is people come and go, they play the game, you know, there are different time zones, you know. If they're really good, maybe you add them so that you can play with them again. But from us, it was just from that point on, it was not about the game anymore. It became about who are you and who am I, and we talked for hours after that, instead of really caring about our KDA in the game. I'm sure, much to the appreciation of our teammates, I'm sure.
Yeah, now it's not even about us anymore. Now it's about the thing that we can create.
Mm-hmm. What happens? I have a comment here. I wrote this down, so I need your comment on this. Okay, what
Yeah.
happens to your consciousness if we had that tool to measure your consciousness when you zone out, or when you Udo, as I like to call it, when we get Udo'd? Okay.
Explain that term.
Okay, so I'm not very nice to Udo, but sometimes, and I apologize to you, Udo. I'm really sorry, but it is.
I know you're joking.
It is. I am joking. I'm not serious, and it is funny. But I needed to describe this phenomena. We're talking about language on this episode, right? And sometimes Udo, he spaces out, and sometimes he makes mistakes, and sometimes because well, you would agree probably, right? Well, you tell me if I'm, but you're not super great at multitasking.
Absolutely horrible. Ask any one of my teammates.
So I have named that getting Udo'd sometimes, because every now and then you need a decision, or you need him to like do something, and he just spaces out, and then the time passes, and then it's too late to make it. You know, it's too late, and that has become getting Udo'd. And sometimes, so what happens to your consciousness when you zone out, or when you Udo the rest of us? Would you measure lower on consciousness or higher? Because or maybe that's not how it works. Maybe just because you're spending time thinking, maybe you're not more conscious. Maybe consciousness, because that's what we're saying, right? Is it qualitative or quantitative? Is more consciousness more life forms, or is it more, like you're saying, a better qualitative thinking where you're more attached and therefore more effective with that mind-body connection?
Yeah, I think that's the latter.
You think it's this one, the qualitative?
Yeah.
That's so interesting. Yeah, because I'm more utilitarian. We just took a quiz, you and I, and I'm not more utilitarian than you, actually. But it's interesting that you're saying this, because I am, in my thinking, more utilitarian on this. I think that because without the millions of life forms in my gut biome, I would not be alive. I think that there is a significant need for considering the quantity as well as part of the conglomerate of consciousness or sentient things. I mean, it's probably a mix of both. I'm sure everything is gray, everything is in the middle, in nature, right? So you probably need a certain amount of gut biome to keep you alive, but you also need a certain amount of qualitative sentient consciousness as well to be effective with that mind-body connection.
Okay, back to your question. What happens in my brain?
Yeah, what
the
do you
level
think?
of consciousness
What happens
when
to
I'm
it?
doing something?
Yeah, when you're
Um,
doing something, what happens?
I think I I think the consciousness values literally just go to zero at that point, and I need a hard reset.
I just heard like when there's no one at the end of the phone, you're calling a number and it goes doo doo doo. No one.
you-
And then,
You just hear it this Windows restart sound.
yeah.
Windows is restarting again in my brain.
Yeah, of course. I'm saying that just because if you were like we were saying more or less conscious when you were in coma, etc. We would also have to consider this too. Or Zen meditation. If you're meditating, are you increasing the quality of your consciousness? Maybe.
And it's measurable through
Yeah.
EEG scans.
Or what about like you mentioned earlier? What about during starvation, whether it's active or inactive, or active choice or involuntary, like Ramadan, for example, right? You're choosing. Many people say they feel much closer to God, quote unquote. Maybe you're measuring higher on consciousness
I think
when
so.
you're close to death. Maybe when you have these near death experiences. Or I'm not saying that during Ramadan people are near death. That's not what I mean. Please don't take it that way. But just the act of going through Ramadan, people are saying that they feel close to what they say God, which maybe then in my term as an atheist, I would potentially then throw in a substitute word, meaning maybe consciousness or whatever it is that makes up us.
I think anything that puts you out of your comfort zone gives you a higher level of consciousness. If you're willing to take the next step, if you're pushing yourself.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's something that David Goggins, for example, said on the Joe Rogan podcast, that he's like going through all these really painful experiences of running for many hours straight, or when he's doing his pull-up questions, then pull-up challenges for many hours and making a new record.
Mm-hmm.
He's saying that he's extracting lessons from these experiences.
Yeah, I've heard him say this.
And I think these lessons that he's talking about, it's literally a higher level of consciousness that he's achieving.
He's
Like-
always trying to find out what is he capable of, and I think what he perceives is the closer he is to finding out these answers as he pushes his body through things, and he feels that this is what life is. This is what the purpose of life is. To get these extraction of these answers of what is a human, what am I capable of, what are psychological and mental things that I'm being told, how can I overcome those? I mean, he's always constantly challenging all these different things, and that could be then a mind body connection, if you want to say it that way. He's min-maxing his experience in this life,
Yeah, and I guess this is a good end to the episode.
Okay,
Thanks for listening.
thank you for listening. As always, we love you.
See you next time.
Bye bye.
You go next.
Okay.